That's bullshit. I've never been so pissed in my whole life. I just murdered Charlie Kirk right here in Utah. I'm so freaking pissed right now.
Now, we have all seen white men crashing out on the internet in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death. Now, maybe not to the extreme that guy did in this video, but we've seen it everywhere, as white men in particular are angry that people are not sad enough that Charlie Kirk died, and they want to punish them by getting them fired and claiming that saying that someone who was a bad person is dead doesn't deserve sympathy is celebrating their death. And all of that has to do with a couple of things. The first of which is that they are seeing that there are consequences for their reasonable racism. So what is reasonable racism? Well, reasonable racism is the idea that white people can't be blamed for their racism because they're just working with the data that they have. So like when a white woman clutches her purse tightly to her body as a black man approaches her, that's not being racist, that's just being reasonable because after all, don't black men commit more crimes? And even when you present the truth that black men do not commit more crimes than white men, they can come back with, well, you know, that's just the data that I have. That's what was provided to me. Therefore, I'm not really racist. But even if I was racist in that moment, you can't blame me. And that's what reasonable racism is. And this applies to Charlie Kirk when he would talk about people of color, you know, whether it was talking about black men or women or Hispanics coming into this country, he would say things that seemed reasonable because he would cherry pick statistics in order to paint the narratives he was trying to paint. And stereotypes in the media only reinforce these reasonable racist beliefs, and I've talked about this in my paper, Implicit Resentment and the Gun Policy Preferences of White Americans, and how they use these stereotypes that are presented in the media as justification for their needs to be armed. Now, the roots of this reasonable racism idea can really be traced back to the Southern strategy, and I'll let one of the architects of that, Lee Atwater, explain what that is. And as a side note, I have edited out his prolific use of the N-word. If you want to see the unedited version of this, you can find it on YouTube.
Here's how I would approach that issue as a statistician or a political scientist, or no, as a psychologist, which I'm not, is how abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, now y'all aren't quoting me on this. You start out in 1954 by saying, by 1968 you can't say anything hurts your backfire, so you say stuff like force busing, states' rights and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites.
Now, y'all don't quote me on this, but straight from the horse's mouth, Lee Atwater is talking about the Southern strategy and how you can't be explicitly racist anymore. Instead, you have to be implicitly racist so that there is a reasonable doubt that you are being racist. And that's what reasonable racism is. And these white men are upset because they are seeing that someone paid the price for being a reasonable racist. Because white men are now seeing that they can also suffer the consequences for their words, and therefore they have to punish anyone who might bring those consequences against them. After all, they're just being reasonable, right? And so when they saw someone like Charlie Kirk, who was being racist but doing it in a reasonable way, then get killed, suddenly they think, oh my God, that could happen to me, and I'm angry about it. Because again, white men don't historically experience the consequences of their own words. White men have been historically allowed to say whatever the hell we want to say. We could be as racist as we want, as sexist as we want, and there was no consequence for doing so. And now we are starting to see that maybe that's not true anymore, that there could be consequences, and violent ones at that. Because after all, if you can't make racist statements like Charlie Kirk did here about the Great Replacement Theory, then what can you do? Because as white men, we should be allowed to say things like Charlie Kirk said here, because that's just reasonable and, you know, based in stereotypes that I thought were factual. And that's what's at the heart of it all. White men want to be racist, and they want to be able to do it without suffering the consequences of being racist. And that's why they're crashing out so hard. That's why they want to punish people for talking badly about Charlie Kirk by just saying the things that Charlie Kirk said. Charlie Kirk was not a good person, as I just showed with just 2 screenshots. Charlie Kirk has a history of being a supporter of things like eugenics, which was a Nazi platform, and of saying really racist and horrible shit. He also said that kids can die for his Second Amendment, which is going to always put him on the opposite side of me in any kind of debate or argument. But anyway, go read the book. I think you'll enjoy it. The Hidden Cost of Being Black in America.